Hello and welcome back to the third and final instalment of my RVJ video diaries for Context of Photography. I have a little bit more research into some different cults, how they got started and, you know, the power of their leaders and stuff. But before I jump into that, I want to talk about Freud's 5 psychosexual stages because I think it actually relates quite closely to Tail Swan's completion process, which I talked about in a previous video. Freud came up with this theory that basically you're obsessed with a different part of your body depending on how old you are, and how you kind of deal with that kind of time of your life, and how you're raised to think about it depends on how you then view it as an adult. The first one is oral, which is supposed to be from birth to when you're about 1 year old, and basically during this time you're kind of obsessed with, you know, feeding and, you know, things to do with the mouth. And so if you're, you know, if something goes wrong during this stage, and you're not kind of brought up correctly, shall we say, then you have some kind of issue with that region of your body in the future. So maybe it could be like an eating disorder or something like that. The second one is anal, which is 1 to 3 years old, and that's supposed to be to do with like learning to potty train basically. So if something goes wrong there, if you're shamed about it or whatever, then problems will arise in the future. The third is the Phallic Stage, which is supposed to be from 3 to 6 years old, and that's kind of when children are learning the differences between men and women and figuring out what's going on down there. So if something goes wrong during this stage, then again it will affect, like, I guess, like their sexuality or something like that in the future. The fourth is the latent stage, which is supposed to be from ages 6 to when you get to puberty, and that's kind of when like the sexual urges are repressed and you're kind of learning more about social skills and how to communicate with people. And the fifth stage is the genital stage, which is from puberty until death, and that's when you're like sexually active. Yeah, basically what Freud says is that if something goes wrong during one of these stages, then you'll have some kind of mental implication in the future. So I thought of Tail Swan's completion process when I heard about Freud's theory, because she says that everybody has some kind of root trauma that you experienced when you were a child. And Freud's theory kind of expands on that and is almost like figuring out where this trauma has come from and, you know, how it has developed over time, essentially. So obviously not everybody agrees with this theory, and I'm not sure I really fully do, but obviously, you know, it's quite interesting to draw parallels between Freud, who is, you know, a celebrated psychologist, and Tail Swan, who has no qualifications at all and doesn't really know what she's talking about. So it just kind of made me rethink the whole completion process. Maybe there is an element of truth to it. Again, I'm not convinced because I'm still not really sure about these psychosexual stages, but it was something to think about, something that kind of sparked my interest. So as I said, I did a little bit more research into some different cults. I found a lady called Schreiner, who is an online cult leader. She has lots of YouTube videos. I think she's dead, like quite recently died, but I can't actually find any evidence of it online or anywhere, so I don't know, she could be dead, she might not be dead, it could just be some weird conspiracy theory, which would fit into her beliefs, as I will explain. So this is one of the only photos of Sherry Schreiner on the internet. Bear in mind she supposedly died at the age of 54, and she's obviously not 54 in this photo. Considering she really does think she is God's child, it surprises me that she doesn't want to put herself out there more than she does. Since filming this video, I've found one website that mentions her death. She supposedly died on January 7th, 2018. On this website, she has a petition to the father to go home and basically says that, you know, she's worked her butt off for something that people mock her for and don't believe her for. And she's tried her best and she wants to go to heaven and be with God. There's also a Facebook post from somebody called Rhonda, who is said to be Sherry's spiritual sister, which just talks about how her death is something to be celebrated rather than mourn over, because she's finally got what she wanted. This is the only evidence I can find that she is dead. There is no reputable news source that even mentions her death. So again, I'm not really sure. Considering she wanted to die and be with God, it wouldn't surprise me if she's faked her own death just to kind of live out the last years of her life quietly. Overall, I find her persona very, very interesting, but I think out of all of the cults I looked at, this has got to be by far the hardest one to understand in terms of how people actually believe and follow the things that she said. I mean, she doesn't even show her face, so I don't understand how anybody could actually trust somebody when they don't even know what they look like. So she believes that Satan sent one of his top-ranking generals to kill her because as she grew older, she had a prophetic calling on her life and would become the devil's worst nightmare. Her words, not mine. Again, this is a direct quote from her website. I confirmed that the Lord had anointed me to decode his word. I was his messenger. So she basically thought that she was like Jesus reborn, I guess. But the main belief of this cult that she has created is that there is a race of devil-worshipping, shape-shifting reptiles from outer space that have infiltrated our society and are trying to take over the world, basically, and bring about the rule of the Antichrist. She basically thinks that these reptiles wear, like, skin suits to make them look human, and she has so many videos on her YouTube channel of just, like, ugly footage of famous people. And that's supposed to be evidence of their skin suit malfunctioning. She also thinks things like shootings or even like natural disasters like hurricanes or something are actually constructed by the government. Yeah, I don't really understand the thinking behind that one, but there we go. And she was a Diana conspiracy theorist. She thought that Diana was killed by her family because she was telling people that they're actually lizards. But I think the extent of her power is shown in the Barbara Rogers and Stephen Mineo case. And essentially what happened is these two were both part of Sherry Schreiner's cult, and Stephen posted a photo online of him eating beef tartare, so raw beef essentially, and Sherry Schreiner said that this is a sign that he's a lizard person, that he's part of succubus societies and he's not allowed in this cult anymore. So kicked him out of the cult because he was eating beef. And because, you know, he was all encompassed within this cult, he asked his girlfriend Barbara to shoot him, which she did, and then she was then jailed for it. Sherry Schreiner actually came back and said, no, it wasn't Barbara, it was a government conspiracy. So, although Sherry Schreiner was obviously absolutely crazy and her conspiracy theories are just ludicrous and obviously not true, this just goes to show what kind of power she had over the members of her cult. I mean, you know, one thing, just kicking him out, ended up with him dead. So then I did a little bit of research into NXIVM, which is spelled NXIVM. Which was founded by Keith Raniere, and it was supposed to be like a self-improvement organisation offering like workshops and seminars and stuff like that to help you help yourself, I guess. It wasn't a cheap thing either. Members had to pay more than $7,500 for 12-hour intensive sessions. But the program wasn't actually anything new. It just kind of pulled ideas from a bunch of other self-help programs. And included like lots of religious ideals and hypnosis and stuff. That's kind of beside the point though, because it was kind of recently found out that Raniere was using NXIVM to recruit people for DOS, which stands for Dominus Obsequious Sororium, which is Latin for Master over Female Slave. People who were recruited into DOS were told that it was like an unorthodox feminist organisation to help women with like self-discipline and overcoming their intimacy issues. But really what it was Raniere's like sex cult. It's actually disgusting to read about. So as part of entry into DOS, women had to give up collateral, which was essentially videos of them masturbating or videos of them falsely confessing that, you know, members of their family had sexually assaulted them. They had to send pictures of their genitals to their masters with their faces in, so they were fully recognisable. They were told to stick to low-calorie diets, and that was basically just because Raniere liked skinnier women. They also had to respond to readiness drills in the middle of the night, which were just text messages. And if they didn't respond quick enough, they would get sexually punished. But I think the most horrific part of being indoctrinated into DOS was the branding process that the women had to go through. So what would happen is women were stripped naked and tied to a table and then would beg to be branded with Keith Raniere's initials. And the women were told that pain is how we know how much we love. We know the depth of our love through pain. When they feel the pain, they think about love. The women didn't know that it was Keith Raniere's initials either. They just thought they were being branded as part of the introduction to this organisation, this feminist organisation. There's a lot of debate around why women would actually join this cult in the first place. But I mean, I think once you read into it a little bit, it's kind of obvious. I mean, these women didn't know that it was a sexual thing. They didn't know Raniere was pulling the strings and making them do all these things just for his pleasure. They thought it was like a female empowerment thing, and a lot of the women who became part of this, they were just looking to find love within themselves, and you know, they weren't looking for anything else. They thought it was a female empowerment thing. The actress Alison Mack actually became part of this cult. Apparently she was constantly searching for something that was missing in her life, and she thanked Renier directly in an email, and said nothing made her feel more powerful than being made completely powerless by him. So again, this just shows like the desperation of these women, and they were being taken completely advantage of for somebody's sexual pleasure. I'll finish with a quote from one of Renier's ex-girlfriends. "He convinces you that your successes are not your own, your successes are only because he exists." So as well as being somebody who's sexually motivated, he had kind of this god complex as well. So absolutely terrible man. I don't know if he's actually finished his trial, but I know he was on trial for the things that he did to women. And I hope he gets jailed for the rest of his life, because he's a terrible man. So what all of this research has been leading up to is the creation of my own abstract video piece, which I have titled Dominus Superservum, which is Latin for the slave master. And yes, I got the idea from Nexium's Dominius Obsequious Sororium. Please enjoy the video now, and I'll go into a little bit more detailed analysis afterwards. Pain is how we know how much we love. We know the depth of our love through pain. When they feel pain, they think of that love.
Please brand me. It would be an honor I want to wear
for the rest of my life.
Armageddon that would spring forth in a nuclear hell. We have to be prepared for that. But we also have to be prepared to go to other places in the world if the dictatorship takes over. Because I told you that not one of my children is going to end up in a concentration camp. We'll have to kill them all first.
I confirm that the Lord had anointed me to decode his word. I was his messenger.
I represent divine principle, divine socialism. I will not pass away. But I shall stand throughout the endless ages of time.
So as I have previously discussed, I wanted to structure the video in terms of the different stages of the indoctrination process, and I think I actually managed to do that quite effectively. So I'll run through the video step by step so you can see what I'm talking about. So the first step, the crossroads in life, are all about kind of feeling isolated, not knowing what to do, and you know, kind of deciding what to do with your life. So for that I used contrasting shots of like the different weather, so like rain and kind of more of a sunny day. I kind of contrasted kind of the still shots to more like jittery shots walking through the park, and kind of just general shots of like crossroads, you know, actual crossroads and kind of like division. So that was kind of the starting point. So the second stage is the soft sell, which of course is where these kind of culty ideas are being introduced. And for that I started to overlay different kind of figures onto the images that I was showing. So kind of trying to focus it more on the light. So obviously a light's kind of like a symbol of hope and stuff like that. So I kind of tried to overlay these different images where the light was coming from within the kind of main image. I also tried to use kind of nicer quotes at the start of the video and then kind of make them get darker as the video went on. Again, just to kind of bring in that sort of soft sell element to it. So the third stage is the new reality, and I consider the start of that within the video to be the shot of the rainbow with the rainbow smoke overlaid onto the top. Again, I've put like a nicer quote underneath to kind of further introduce the culty ideas. I've also begun to introduce kind of more of the glitched out time lapses at that point to kind of show a switch in mental attitude, I suppose. And I've also used a rising shepherd's tone to kind of begin to bring in more of like a creepy, suspicious atmosphere to the piece. So the fourth stage is the relationship with the leader. So I started to use more kind of like Jesus-like imagery. You can see kind of like the figure with like the backlit, so it's kind of like quite a holy glowing light behind them. I continued the idea of like the light representing some kind of holy being by using the shot of like the lens flare that's kind of coming through the trees as kind of like a continuous motif throughout the video to kind of represent the leader and their power. I also have the quote, "Please brand me, it would be an honor I want to wear for the rest of my life," underneath that section of the video. Again, just to kind of show the subservience that you would have towards your cult leader if you were indoctrinated into a cult. So the fifth stage is the enemy, and I think within the video it's kind of the most obvious part to pick out. So for this I used time-lapse shots of the city and then kind of glitched them out and desaturated them to show that they're kind of, you know, an opposition and they're not really desirable and you don't want to be a part of them. I used a piercing tone underneath that gets quite hard to listen to the more you listen to it, to again kind of further express that they're like the enemy, the opposition to the cult that you're now a part of. There's also a quote underneath that talks about the Armageddon, which is from Jim Jones, and I thought quite fit nicely with the whole idea of like opposition, enemy, you know, something coming in and kind of taking away your way of life. So sixth stage is peer pressure, and I created these glitchy shots of like some people walking in and then their silhouettes kind of like exploding across the screen with some of that kind of hopeful imagery in the background. From this stage to the end of the video is supposed to be kind of like the creepiest and, you know, the part where you're really questioning what you've got yourself into, really. So the last stage is about the narcissistic leader, which I have portrayed again with kind of like the Jesus-y posed figure, and kind of created like a sinister tone to it with the red smoke effects and the glitching of the images in the background. I've also used another Jim Jones quote where he says he will stand throughout the endless ages of time. Again, just to kind of show the power that they think they have and kind of this god complex that they all seem to have. And I would just like to mention that all of the quotes that were used in the video are from different cult leaders. So I used a lot of Jim Jones ones. There was a Taylor Swan one in there was a couple from Nexium, and there was one from Schreiner as well. Overall, I have really enjoyed this project, and one of my favourite things was just like researching about these different cults. They are very interesting, although very scary, but are very interesting to look into. I really enjoyed doing more research into the whole idea of narrative as well, which I go into a lot of detail in my critical commentary. And I think the research for that has really helped me understand what narrative actually means and how you can utilise it to its fullest potential and create something, you know, that fully encapsulates what you're trying to say. I've also really enjoyed exploring like the technical aspects of this. So I used this camera, which is new to me. I haven't used this before for basically all of the project. So that was really nice to get to know the camera. I'd never tried time-lapse before, so that was really fun. I found a new way of doing time-lapse where it's all like jittery and weird, which again was very interesting and I enjoyed playing with that. And editing is kind of my thing, so I really enjoyed kind of putting the whole thing together and thinking about the best editing techniques to really give the atmosphere that I was looking for and tell the story of the indoctrination process. I really like my video and I think it turned out really well, and I think, you know, encapsulates what I'm trying to say, at least to the best of my ability. If I were to continue this project, I think I would just, you know, continue to add to that video, continue to find different locations that could contribute some way to the narrative. Overall, it has kind of affirmed my enjoyment for like video editing and using video formats for my projects. So again, this is something that I will probably want to continue in the future. Something else I mentioned in my essay is that I really enjoy kind of physically manipulating things as well. So like collage or ripping stuff up or, you know, stuff like that. So I think I would quite like to explore the idea of, you know, combining the digital and physical things together and see what I could come up with. So perhaps that would be my next project or something I would be doing in the future. But yeah, that is all from me. I hope you've enjoyed finding out about all this research and kind of seeing this video come to life. I think it's a really effective final piece. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope I get first.